10 lives cut short in a grocery store. Three other wounded by a hate-filled individual who had driven 200 miles from Binghamton in that range to carry out a murderous, racist rampage that he would live stream to the world. What happened here is simple and straightforward. Terrorism. Domestic terrorism. Violence inflicted in the service of hate and the vicious thirst for power that defines one group of people being inherently inferior to any other group. A hate that through the media and politics, the internet, has radicalized, angry, alienated, lost, and isolated individuals into falsely believing that they will be replaced, that's the word, replaced by the other, by people who don't look like them, and who are therefore in a perverse ideology that they possess and being fed lesser beings. I and all of you reject the lie. I call on all Americans to reject the lie. And I condemn those who spread the lie for power, political gain, and for profit.
This is Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. I want to say all praise Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and all the Akim laboring in the work, pushing out this truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. We hasten for the return of Hamashiach Yahweh Shai and the establishment of righteousness on earth and the destruction of this wicked kingdom. Before I start with my lesson, I want to give my disclaimer. I'm not a member of Great Millstone, but those are the brothers that I listen to and I learn from. So I always want to make sure I give them their credit and their just due. I also make that disclaimer just in case I go off on any scripture or go off in any way. I don't want the ministry to be blamed. Now, the name of this lesson is going to be Two Horns Like a Lamb. And these two horns are referring to this two-party political system here in America, Babylon the Great. And this two-party system creates what is referred to as the left-right paradigm. And through the creation of this left-right paradigm, they use a strategy known as the Hegelian dialectic to control the people with different laws and legislation. So I have two news clips that I'm going to play in a few moments that tie in with the clip I played in the intro, and you'll be able to see clearly the hypocrisy of this place and the true agenda, which is to divide the people, which at the end of the day all ties in with prophecy. But I don't want to ramble too much, so let's hop right into the scriptures. So this is Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Now this beast coming up out of the earth is America, Babylon the Great, and it has the appearance of a lamb because the lamb is a very docile creature. It has the appearance as if it is here to help. And he had two horns. Again, those two horns represent this two-party political system. But this beast speaks as a dragon. And how does he speak as a dragon? Through his draconian laws and legislation. Now we're going to look up these terms or phrases I mentioned. Draconian, left-right paradigm, and Hegelian dialectic for some edification. But before I do so, because I never know who is going to happen across these videos, I want to explain this beast in verse 11 in relation to the beast mentioned in the beginning of the chapter. So let's read verse 11 again. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Verse 12, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Whose deadly wound was healed. That's the key. Now, when we scroll up to verse 1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. This beast is representing the major Edomite powers through the course of history, coming together to eventually form this beast system that you have now in NATO and the EU, with America and Canada being a part of NATO. Verse 2, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. That leopard is representing the Greek Empire, because that's the beginning when Esau Edom came on the scene in authority. And his feet represent Gog and Magog, or Russia. The feet are not necessarily part of the beast system, but they represent the end of this beast system. And the mouth of the lion represents the ruling elite. It represents England, the British, UK. And the dragon gave him his power. This dragon is the ancient Roman Empire, and it is represented by one of the 7 heads that we read in verse 1. When we read verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. It is the Roman Empire who received that deadly wound. Now, when we jump back down to verse 11, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. The first beast is referring to the ancient Roman Empire as described in Daniel chapter 7, because the Roman Empire will be the 4th beast upon the earth during the time that the Savior will come back. So this beast that's being described in verse 11 is the re-emergence of one of those heads that was wounded, that particular head being the Roman Empire. America is the reincarnation of Rome, and this beast system is the reincarnation of the Roman Empire. And these 2 horns go back to the same political system that the Romans had, with the patricians and the plebeians. So I just wanted to provide a little edification on the beast that's being spoken of in verse 11. Now let's look up some of these terms, and let's start with draconian, and we'll get the simple definition. Draconian, of laws or their application, excessively harsh and severe. So that's the basic concept of draconian laws. Did want to get a little history. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. So this is from World History Encyclopedia, and this is dealing with Draco's law code. Draco was an aristocrat who in 7th century BCE Athens was handed the task of composing a new body of laws. We have no particular clues concerning his life in general biography, and the only certainty is that as an aristocrat and an educated man, he was in the right place at the right time in order to take his opportunity and legislate. During the infancy of the Athenian legal system, Draco composed the city's first written law code with the aim of reducing arbitrary decisions of punishment and blood feuds between parties. Ultimately, though, the laws aided and legitimized the political power of the aristocracy and allowed them to consolidate their control of the land and poor. Famously harsh, the laws were ultimately replaced by Solon in 594 BCE. So that was the main part I wanted to read, to show that ultimately the end goal of these laws is to consolidate more control over the people and eventually the world. So with the understanding of draconian measures being used to influence and gain control over the people, you have to think of it in terms of a spiritual battle and a worldwide agenda. And this is what I mean. If I ask you to think of your own example of draconian measures, you might think of an example like a brother steals a loaf of bread, gets caught, and is sentenced to 50 years in prison, which is a perfect example, especially dealing with Jake in this legal system. But a more spiritual example with an agenda attached would be something like a kid you never heard of in a city somewhere you never heard of is playing some online game you never heard of, and some other kid calls the first kid a homophobic slur. And this is just an hypothetical example. And the first kid supposedly gets so depressed over being called this homophobic slur that he commits suicide. And again, this is just a hypothetical example. So this kid's suicide ends up getting national attention somehow, and every news station is covering the story, playing the same sad music, telling the same inspiring backstory, convincing you that this can never be allowed to happen again. And somehow the government hears your thoughts and says, you know what? The American people are right. This can never be allowed to happen again. So the government makes it a hate crime to use a homophobic slur in any situation. Even if the alphabet person call you a name first, your homophobic slur will trump what they said, and now you've committed a hate crime. And in addition to the new hate crime, the government thinks all children should be re-educated on sexuality now. And this is still just a hypothetical situation, but you fast forward a year later, you get a call from your son's school because he is being suspended because he thinks that girls should wear dresses. Now, your son can't come back to school unless you and him attend a 2-day course called Accepting Everyone, or We're All One Family, or You Should Love Everybody, or whatever it could be. You get what I'm saying? Again, this is just a hypothetical example showing how you have to compromise your spirit in order to navigate around the laws and legislation of this system. And that's what most people do. They compromise their spirit to fit into this system. They go along to get along. Now, in the truth, we don't compromise our spirit. Now, we do walk circumspectly. You know, there's a difference between navigating through the system and going along with the system. But anyway, I just wanted to again use an example of how these draconian laws and legislations have a greater impact than just the typical examples we might think of. Alright, now from here, I want to look up this phrase, left-right paradigm. And we'll just read the first two paragraphs. So, the left-right paradigm is a concept from political sciences and anthropology, and anthropology is the study of human behaviors, which proposes that societies have a tendency to divide themselves into ideological opposites. Important contributions to the theory of the paradigm were made by British social anthropologist Rodney Needham, who saw it as a basic human classifying device. It shares affinity with the cultural romantic classic paradigm. The term is used to analyze political discourse since the 19th century. It has, however, been suggested that in the 21st century, the paradigm will become less useful as a tool of social and political analysis. Some of the major current issues, such as population growth, individual liberties, and biological warfare, cannot be said to allow for either a left or right wing perspective. And that part is true, because the agenda of the New World Order, there's not going to be a need for a left and a right. The left and the right paradigm is used to usher in division, chaos, and the illusion of a choice. So the solution can be the one world government, where there won't be any more need for divisiveness or liberties outside of whatever the government allows. Alright, so let's read the second paragraph. Alright, so the left-right paradigm as political criticism. Used in other contexts, the phrase refers to a political theory that alleges that members of opposing major political parties, such as the Republican and Democratic parties in the United States, share common interests and goals, as well as a covertly unified ruling authority over the political issues of the masses. The two major political entities act in concert to create divisiveness among the population while keeping control of the political spectrum. This left-right paradigm concept theorizes that the two opposing political parties utilize their tremendous hold over mainstream media to dramatize political distractions and engage in covert warfare and operations, and grand performances of bureaucratic rivalry meant to propagandize and divide the populace. And that's really what it's all about. And you're going to see that, particularly dealing with the speech Biden made concerning the event in Buffalo, using that event to express the concern that these crazy Edomite men, so-called white men, so you can understand, have this idea straight out of the bizarro world that they are being replaced, and that they are crazy for thinking that way. All the while, it is Biden and these other politicians who have invented that concept and are promoting it. But again, this is all part of the agenda. But let's continue reading. Divisive issues are purposefully fed through the major media outlets to divert attention away from the ruling class's hidden or ulterior, sometimes global agendas. By drawing attention to the differences between the two embedded political systems, ideologies, races, and classes, The political groups obscure political clarity and divide unity among the masses. The tactic creates confusion and frustration among the population, which enables the ruling class to increase and consolidate their wealth and power through maintaining an illusion of a two-party system of checks and balances that actually works. The theory contends that the fresh interjection of a new political party or group, such as the expanding Libertarian or Green parties, into the political arena would be the only way to provide a means to break the cyclical paradigm currently established in the political system. Alright, so from here, I just want to real quick just look up the simple definition of Hegelian dialectic, and it states philosophy and interpretive method in which the contradiction between a proposition, which is the thesis, and its antithesis is resolved at a higher level of truth, the synthesis. So this would be a thesis, an antithesis, and then the higher level of truth is the synthesis, which is basically problem, reaction, solution. Now I want to get a little bit more on it. I'm not going to try to make this too deep or anything like that. You can research it, but I like how they explain it in this little, I guess, excerpt right here. And I'm just going to read the first part of this little paragraph. So this is Hegelian dialectic, usually presented in a threefold manner, was stated by Heinrich Moritz Calibo as comprising three dialectical stages of development: a thesis giving rise to its reaction, an antithesis which contradicts or negates the thesis, and the tension between the two being resolved by means of a synthesis. And that's really all I wanted to get. Problem, reaction, solution. Okay, so I'm going to replay the first clip, and then I got two more news clips I'm going to play, and from there we'll just filter everything else through the scriptures.
Diving deeper into the accused gunman's white supremacist views, they fit in with what's known as replacement theory, the fear by a few outspoken white people that they're being replaced by ethnic minorities. It is promoted by some cable news personalities and by others who claim they're good people on both sides of the white supremacist thinking. Here's Lauren Glasper.
Charleston, and now Buffalo. Mass shootings likely provoked in part by extreme racism and a belief in the false Great Replacement theory.
It's pretty clear to me that the Great Replacement theory was at work here.
Scott Richmond heads up the New York and New Jersey section of the Anti-Defamation League. His organization is already looking into the 180-page ramblings left by the accused gunman in the Buffalo shooting. He says it is filled with the kind of hate rhetoric that is freely espoused on social media.
First of all, we need to reform social media, and we need to reform the laws surrounding social media.
But it's also repeated by politicians and amplified by talking heads.
I have less political power because they're importing a brand new electorate. Why should I sit back and take that?
That feeds into vulnerable minds, according to Jennifer Jones Austin, who heads up the New York City Racial Justice Commission.
Now you no longer have to go searching, fishing on the internet and other places to find this information. You just turn on the news or the alleged news.
She says it's time to better regulate media and also encourages more education and greater effort to discredit conspiracies before they lead to violence.
The more that this picks up, and takes hold, at some point it may come to your neighborhood. And so you need to be vigilant and you need to be engaged and use, everybody needs to begin using platforms to speak out against replacement theory.
And now leading social justice groups are calling on President Biden to convene a summit to address the threat of these extremists, the increase in bias and hate crimes, and these conspiracy theories that are running unchecked.
Today, After 250 years, we're going to have to suspend the Bill of Rights. And we're going to begin where the Bill of Rights begins, with the freedom of speech.
You can't prevent people from being radicalized to violence, but we can address the relentless exploitation of the internet to recruit and mobilize terrorism.
The relentless exploitation of the internet to recruit and mobilize terrorism. Okay. But can anyone show, has anyone ever shown, that this specific case, Peyton Gendron, was, quote, recruited and mobilized by the internet? Well, no, in fact. By his own account, he was mentally ill. He snapped. He'd been planning this for a long time. He did what his diseased brain commanded him to do. The internet did not make him do it. He did it himself. But even if Gendron had been, quote, radicalized by what he read on the internet, what then exactly? Many have been radicalized by what they've read. Pol Pot was radicalized by reading Das Kapital. He went on a murder spree. He killed more than 1 million people. Should we ban that book? Should we ban all books, all internet sites that, quote, radicalize people? What exactly is Joe Biden saying here? Well, he's saying that thanks to what happened in Buffalo over the weekend, you no longer have any rights at all, including the most basic, which is to read what you want. After nullifying the First Amendment, Joe Biden moved to the Second Amendment.
The venom of the haters and their weapons of war, the violence and the words and deeds that stalk our streets, our stores, our schools. This venom, this violence cannot be the story of our time. But there are certain things we can do. We can keep assault weapons off our streets. We've done it before.
So because a mentally ill 18-year-old used a specific rifle to commit these crimes, you can't have that rifle. Now, Joe Biden's bodyguards can have that rifle, so can Nancy Pelosi's, and of course they do. In fact, you pay for it all. But they're important, and you are not, so you can't. So because the people in charge fail to protect shoppers in Buffalo, you're not allowed to defend your family, despite the fact you may believe your family's every bit as important as Joe Biden and his family, and Nancy Pelosi and her family. But they're not as important. So we're going to defund the police and disarm you. That's how it works now, sorry. And then Joe Biden got to the main point of his speech, which is that people who criticize his immigration policies are responsible for the violence you saw in Buffalo. Here's the President of the United States explaining that.
A hate that through the media and politics, the internet, has radicalized, angry, alienated, lost, and isolated individuals into falsely believing that they will be replaced, that's the word, replaced, by the other. And I condemn those who spread the lie for power, political gain, and for profit.
So you lock the country down, lock kids out of their schools for 2 years, force them to get, quote, educated on the internet, but it's someone else's fault that they're, quote, alienated. They've been hearing about the Great Replacement Theory. You've heard a lot about the Great Replacement Theory recently. It's everywhere in the last 2 days, and we're still not sure exactly what it is. Here's what we do know for a fact. There is a strong political component to the Democratic Party's immigration policy. We're not guessing this. We know this, and we know it because they have said so. They've said it again and again and again. They've written books on it, and monographs, and magazine articles. They've bragged about it endlessly. They talk about it on cable news constantly. And they say out loud, we are doing this because it helps us to win elections. That's not something they've said once. It's something they've gloated about again and again and again. And we think that's wrong. And in case you doubt us, here they are.
Blue wave is African American. Yeah! It's white, it's Latino, it's Asian Pacific Islander. It is made up of those who've been told that they are not worthy of being here. Yeah! It is comprised of those who are documented and undocumented.
In a couple of presidential cycles, you'll be on election night. You'll be announcing that we're calling the 38 electoral votes of Texas for the Democratic nominee for president. It's changing. It's going to become a purple state and then a blue state because of the demographics.
The demographics of America are not on the side of the Republican Party. The new voters in this country are moving away from them, and instead they're moving to be independents or to even vote on the other side.
An unrelenting stream of immigration, nonstop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent For the first time in 2017, we'll be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America from then and on will be white European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
So you play clips of them saying it, and you're the deranged conspiracy nut.
All right, so you should be able to clearly see the hypocrisy. You know, on the one hand, they use these events, whether they are real, whether they're false flags, whether they are psyops, or whatever the situation may be. They use these events to push one side of the political agenda, all the while being behind that same political agenda, being behind the idea that creates the discourse between the political agendas. You know, they push the idea that these racist Edomites are getting more and more racist and showing more and more of their racism, which they are, but they're egging on these Edomites by telling them, yeah, you're going to be replaced. We got all these immigrants coming in. And it goes deeper than that, you know. It's the same concept of them decriminalizing a certain amount of theft or shoplifting in California. So you see all these Jakes, these Edomites sit back on these TV shows, or these sit back and watch these news shows. They see all these Jakes running fucking wild, killing each other over the weekends, then being allowed to shoplift in masses, and nothing is being done about it. Meanwhile, they're telling you, or telling these Edomites on the news, yeah, you're becoming the minority. Every single thing you do is racist. Every single thing they do is okay. It makes these Jakes get more and more bold to do wickedness, and it makes these Edomites get fed up with all the wickedness, and they in turn display more of their wickedness. And it's all about control. It's all about to bring chaos and control. But at the end of the day, the scriptures told us that these things would happen. So I'm not going to ramble too much, and I'm just going to get a few scriptures. The most important thing that I wanted to point out was, again, the hypocrisy. The way these two horns work out. The way they play out. And ultimately, you know, the two horns play each other to play the masses to come out with new laws and new legislation. When you listen to Tucker Carlson, it's going deeper than just the internet, you know, them censoring the internet, which they're doing, but it's ultimately going to lead to them censoring the Bible, because you're hearing more and more in the news how the Bible is seen as a source of some of this hate for not being accepting of these alphabet people and these different nouns and pronouns and non-binary codes, or whatever they want to be referred to. You know, ultimately is to keep you Jakes, you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans severed from the Most High. And all this tension, again, is order out of chaos. But like I said, let's get to the scriptures, because the scriptures prophesied that all this was going to happen. So I think it's appropriate to read Revelations 13 and 11 again with some understanding, and then we're going to go to Isaiah. So this is Revelations chapter 13 verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Again, this beast is America. It has the appearance as if it's going to help. How? We need to stop all these mass shootings. We need to end hate. You see the two horns going back and forth. What's the legislation? It's the dragon speaking, and it's going to speak with that legislation. We need more censorship on the internet. We need to censor free speech, which is truth speech. They have no problem with you watching somebody twerk. They have no problem with that. Or somebody doing some stupid shit, you know, eating a whole tub of Jello, or diving in a pool of cereal. They have no, or doing the latest dance, or you going in Walmart, everybody shopping, and then all of a sudden you just dance. They have no problem showing that. They even got something on YouTube called Naked Yoga, and they show everything. You don't got to click on the actual video. You could just scroll through the thumbnails. But they suppress that truth, and ultimately, again, they want the scriptures suppressed. That's how they speak as a dragon. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. He's coming in the same power and the same authority as the ancient pagan Roman Empire, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. See, when you go along with this system, when you go along to get along, you may not be bowing down to a physical idol, but you're bowing down to the beast spiritually. That's why the scriptures tell us to be separate. But again, just to show you how these two horns are playing on the people, but these things were prophesied to happen. So this is Isaiah chapter 19, and we'll start at verse 1. The burden of Egypt. Behold, Yahweh rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. And this is speaking about the actual end, you know, when the Most High sends Yahushua back and the angels to finally bring this place down. But before he does so, you know, things are going to get real hectic on the earth, which verse 2 explains. Verse 2, and I will set the Egyptian against the Egyptian. This is spiritual Egypt. This place, America Babylon the Great, is spiritual Egypt. It's spiritual Babylon. It's spiritual Assyria. It's spiritual Nineveh. It's spiritual Rome. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. So it's going to be race wars. It's going to happen. One, first and foremost, it's prophesied to happen. So it's going to happen. But on a more everyday type level, or I guess carnal level, you can see that these leaders, these political leaders, are moving the people towards that. They're moving them towards civil unrest. The people get more agitated. There's already hatred there. There's already frustration, but how much more when you got, you know, rising gas prices, a lack of baby formula, you know, a lack of food and other supplies, and you're wondering what the future is going to be like. And they're constantly talking about defunding the police and then taking away your weapons if you have them, you know. The people get more and more agitated, more and more worried, more and more frustrated, and they're pointing the fingers at each other. You got Jake, you know, pointing the fingers at Esau, calling them racist, which they are. And there's nothing wrong with racism. All people are racist. It's just that Esau has a hatred for his, or has a hatred with his, a deep hatred in you know, abominable, detestable acts throughout his history, you know, reflecting his racism. Then you got these Edomites seeing their empire crumble, seeing their privilege be taken away, and pretty much being mocked. You know, the country you ran, the image you created, being overrun and destroyed by the people you had in captivity. Because Jake is destroying this place. Don't make no mistake about it. Jake is destroying this place. They're just using Jake to do it. But anyway, I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. Now, let's go to 2nd Esdras, chapter 15, verse 14. And it reads, Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh. And one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. The common day sword is your weapons, your rifles, your pistols. This is how these people are going to fight one another. And it doesn't have to be, when you hear that, you might automatically think, like nation against nation. No, it's talking about people versus people. Remember, when Jacob and Esau were born, it said they were going to be separated because they were two different manner of people. So it's going to be your neighbors. It's going to be the people in your neighborhood fighting against each other with their common day swords. Verse 16, For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. When it says they're not going to regard their kings or their princes, what's your common day king? What's your common day princes? These are your mayors. These are your governors. These are your senators, president, so forth and so on. These political leaders, they're not going to regard them, because again, the tensions are flaring so much just due to so much that is going on, and that's all part of the agenda, is to put the squeeze on the people. The scriptures tell you that they shall wear out the saints, and they are wearing out the saints. They're wearing out the people, and it's not just physically, it's mentally. There's always a back and forth. There's always a new thing popping up. It's always something. Critical race theory. Now you got replacement theory. You had one pandemic. Now we're getting ready for another pandemic. Mask on, mask off. Gas is... First they was helping you out with gas. Now the gas prices are soaring out the roof. It's a certain amount of, it's a certain level of spiritual faith that you have, that you can laugh at these things because you know what's going to happen. The Most High has put the Spirit on His men to prophesy that these things would take place, and to give us wisdom and stability in these times, so we wouldn't freak out. We just clearly see what's going on, and we're just trying to, warn the people, get the blood off our hands. But anyway, I don't want to ramble too much. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. So they're going to be coming in your houses. So when we warn you people, you can see the tensions rising. You can see it's going to be a lack of resources out here. And after this, I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 24. But let me finish reading this. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. How much more so are they going to disregard their princes and their kings when the mayor or the governor is coming on the radio or the television telling people to stay in their houses, when you don't have a police force to enforce it? But they defunding the police, which is all, again, part of the agenda for them to bring in the military and create martial law, which is going to happen. But there's going to be a great tribulation first, and the course of their action shall stand in their power. So whatever they have the power to do, and they're going to do it. And these people are crazy. These people will kill you for cutting them off in the road. These people will kill you for looking at them the wrong way. And it ain't going to be just killing. It's going to be some raping, some beating, some torturing, just because people are sick. They have a lot of demons on them. Verse 17. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. For because of their pride, because of their pride, The cities shall be troubled. The houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Even men gonna be afraid. It's gonna be a crazy ass time. A man shall have no pity on his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. And that's the point that I wanted to get. That's going to lead me into Matthew chapter 24. It says, a man should have no pity on his neighbor. See, it's not going to be a time where, people are kind of banding together for the most part. There's some sense of camaraderie or brotherly love where we're all suffering. I can give a little bit. No, these people, matter of fact, let's just go get it right quick. This is Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. It says, and because iniquity shall abound, iniquity is sin up on top of sin, the love of many shall wax cold. These people are full of iniquity. There is no love. They only think of themselves. They're full of vanity. There's no care for your neighbor anymore. How you imagine. We all grew up in different places at different times, but you have some concept of what that would mean or what that would have looked like a community, a family type community. Where you can go knock on your neighbor's door for some water or borrow some sugar or whatever. There's none of that. People are suspicious of one another. And you have to be, because you never know what somebody's up to. You never know what ulterior motive somebody else has. And that's been all by design as well. Telling you that the laws are done away with. Allowing you to build up in iniquity. So eventually the love of many would wax cold. So when all shit does hit the fan, it's going to be every man for himself. A man is not going to pity his neighbor. Let's go back to 2nd Esdras. 2nd Esdras 15, and we'll read verse 19 again. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. It's going to be the famine. It's also just going to be just because all hell break out. It said for the great tribulation. It's just going to be a very perilous time. And again, people ain't going to be killing just for survival. When all hell breaks out, me and my girl was watching World War Z the other day. We seen it before, but we watched it again. When they was in the supermarket, when the outbreak first hit, they ran into the supermarket to get supplies, and you had what's his name, Brad Pitt, go to the back to try to get some medicine for his daughter. Everybody in the damn supermarket, everybody's in the supermarket trying to get food, and then you had these two Edomite men trying to rape Brad Pitt's wife. And my girl was like, they got time for that? That's a little inside joke. We say, you got time for that? Here it is. You got a fucking zombie apocalypse and you trying to rape somebody. Hey, but that's how it's going to be. These demons are going to come out. So whatever demons that people have on them now that's somewhat suppressed, those things are coming out full force. Anyway, so you get the point. I want to get one more. This is 2nd Esdras 13 and 31. And it reads, now actually let me start at verse 29. Behold, the days come when the Most High will begin to deliver them that are upon the earth, because the Most High is going to be with his elect. And he shall come to the astonishment of them that dwell on the earth. And one shall undertake to fight against another, one city against another, one place against another, one people against another, and one realm against another. So just going to show, before the Most High comes, sends Yahweh Shah back to deliver us. But in those days, again, it's going to be a time like no other. It's called Jacob's trouble for a reason. It's a time like no other since the beginning of the earth. And it's going to be people against people. It's going to be kingdom against kingdom. And it's going to be realm against realm. That realm is going into the spiritual realm. Again, these demons that are on people, they're going to have full control. Again, just a little short lesson. I just wanted to highlight the two things, how this beast system works with those two horns, as if they're here to help out, but they're really just trying to create different legislation and laws to control us more. But in the process of controlling us, they're trying to divide the people more and more to bring about that chaos. But, I'm going to say all praise Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash, for putting the spirit on me to do the lesson. Hopefully it was edifying. And until next time, Shalom.